Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is sponsored and dedicated in honor of Aryeh Binyamin, sponsored anonymously. Also dedicated in loving memory, Nishmat Joseph Major, Yosef Ben Rina Victoria, my father's favorite parasha, Ani Yosef, and for the Askara of our grandfather Morris H. Lee and Moshe Ben Victoria, sponsored by Reina and Ezra Cohen and Raquel and Gabby Haber. Also dedicated for a speedy and complete refuah shlema for Shmuel Ben Geraz, sponsored anonymously. Refuah shlema for the Nishmat Aguf. Also dedicated in loving memory of Vanessa's mother Diana Cohen, Nishmat Diana Bat Sophie Charles, sponsored by Vanessa and Joe God, and as well dedicated for the complete refuah shlema of Chana Bat Simba and Eliyahu Shimon Mazaf Fortuné, and loving memory of Nathan Marcus, Nishmat Ben Rachel, sponsored by the Marcus family, and in loving memory Nishmat Victoria Rachel Bat Yehuda, sponsored by her granddaughters Chloe, Izzy, and Lisa. My friends, let's begin. The pasuk says something very interesting. Vayichalkel Yosef et aviv et echav ve'et kol bet aviv lechem lefi ataf. And Yosef, Vayichalkel, he sustained, he supported his father, his brothers, the whole of the house of his father, lefi ataf, with bread according to how many children, how many mouths they had to feed. But then the pasuk uses a little bit of a different language, only 5 pasukim later. When it talks about the Egyptians, the pasuk tells us about Yosef, not Vayichalkel Yosef, but rather Vayinahalem, and Yosef led them. Balechem b'chol miknehem b'shana hahi. He led them. He guided them. Lenahel means to run the story, to take the wheel. Right now, these two expressions seemingly are there on purpose, and the question is, what for? Boys, also Rabbi Hadjov will be starting his class upstairs now on Hilchot Rambam, Hilchot Teshuvah. So if anyone would like to join that, that's going to be in the Midrash now. So my friends, the question is, why do we have these two expressions? And I want to start with a story that takes place right after the war here in America. There was a rabbi who came to America. His name was Rav Zalman Sorotskin. He came on behalf of the Va'ad HaYeshivot. They had a dinner here, okay, in America, and they were trying to raise funds to be able to sustain and to support the yeshivot in Eretz Israel. All right, they get there, the rabbi gives his speech, whatever, and you had a few donors that stood up, and they said, listen, we're happy to give money to the yeshiva, but here's our list of conditions. Yeshiva has to do this, yeshiva must do that, yeshiva shouldn't do this, yeshiva has to do this, etc., etc., a whole list of demands. Rabbi Sorotskin stood up, and it was his turn to speak. And he stands up and he says, there's 2 different languages that are used, 2 different expressions that are used in the parasha with Yosef. One is Vayichalkel, and he supported et aviv et achiv, his fathers and his brothers, and one is Vayinahalem, and Yosef guided them. Yosef took the wheel. Yosef instructed them. The Egyptians, when it talks about them getting the food, Yosef was minahel otam. What's the difference between the first language and the second language? People didn't know. Nobody knew. They were experts in dikduk and translation, but they didn't know. And the rabbi smiled and he said, when it comes to supporting your family, you support your family, your brothers, your fathers, unconditionally. You give them because they need. You don't try and tell them because of the dollars that you gave that for a slice of bread or for a little bit of beans or for something, you're going to do this or you're going to do that or you're going to do the other thing. When it comes to strangers, okay, you have to get something for your money in a business deal. I understand. But your brother needs something from you. You don't come to your brother with conditions because he's asking you for bread. That's what Rav Zalman Sorotskin said to these donors at the time. And he said, and you have to decide, how are you treating us? Like brothers or like strangers? Now, if you think for a minute on what that means, translated into our times. When you have donors coming from America to Israel that are making all sorts of conditions. We have, in a certain sense as well, the American government coming to Israel's aid with all sorts of conditions. That we want to give you some money, but we want to tell you how to run, the war, how to run your life, how to run etc., etc. For many generations, the aid that came from people over here, the question you have to ask yourself is, are you treating the people on the other end of that aid like a stranger or like a brother? Suddenly, everything begins to change. Now, I must say, we've talked about this a little bit when we came to the story of Hamasnu. We explained that in the language of Ashamnu, there's many different expressions. One of them is Gazalnu, we stole. Hamas in the Torah, what does it mean? It means stealing. But the literal translation of Hamasnu is not to steal. What does it mean when we talk about a situation like that, right, in halakha? So the Chachamim explain that there's a level of stealing that does not involve taking money from somebody else. So as an example, let's say I have a scenario where I have some method of being able to exert force, some method of persuading, some method of forcing you to do something that you don't want to do. That, my friends, is Hamasnu. Let's say, as an example, I coerce you to sell me a building. This happens, by the way, unfortunately, in business all the time. There's a hostile takeover. I paid you for your company, but I forced you to sell it to me. I created a situation where it was untenable anymore for you to own this piece of land or this building or this company or whatever. And I paid you, but the person had no desire to sell whatsoever. When you forced someone against their will to take the money and complete the sale, that's called Hamasnu. My friends, sometimes we don't realize how these terms cross scenarios, where it's not a case where you forced someone to sell you a chefetz, to sell you a building, but you forced them to do something that they didn't want to do. A person might find themselves sometimes in a better financial situation in the family. And the person says, listen, okay, I'm willing to do this for dad, for mom, for the family. I'm willing to do this for the family business. But if I do this, all sorts of conditions, all of a sudden, all sorts of demands, whether they be financial, whether they be about kavod, whether they be about power, you have to ask yourself, is this the way a brother behaves? So what I'd like to do is not just say, this is not how someone behaves, but I'd like to turn the musar of that, of what Rav Sirotskin said at that meal, at that dinner, to all of these donors, I'd like to turn that inside out and perhaps ask, what does it mean to give unconditionally? What does it mean to give to your children and not say to them, well, so long as you're eating at my table, so long as I'm supporting you, you're going to listen to me? Is that Hamas? Is that forcing someone to listen? Is that a scenario where your money and your aid is conditional? So my friends, there's a very interesting, a tightrope walk, shall we say. And let me explain what I mean when I talk about this tightrope walk. When parents seem to be imposing their will on their children, whether it's for religious things, business decisions, can be in 1,000,001 different scenarios. You see, the pasuk says, "Vayichalkel otam Yosef, vayichalkel Yosef et aviv," that Yosef treated his brothers in this way, and he sustained them, and there was no conditions. There was no, you owe me an apology, I need a letter, you need to say this, you need to do that, you need to dance like this. He just gave it to them. But that came after the ultimate Vayinahalem. So it's a nice diuk. But look back at what Yosef did when he gave them the bread in the first two instances. Get me your brother, do this, do that. So my friends, I want to describe what this idea means, Vayinahalem, in a positive way and in a negative way. And I think that sometimes and somehow this might be helpful both for the parents who are executing it sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly, and for the child that sometimes feels executed. To understand, to feel, to recognize, to not resent, to not be upset. Why is Yosef telling them, bring me Binyamin, don't come back unless this, put the money in the bag, make the comeback, hold Shimon? Why is Yosef doing that? Ultimately, we understand that Yosef's intentions were to recreate a teshuvah situation where the brothers could prove both to him and to themselves that the hatred between the sons of Leah and the sons of Rachel had dissipated. That was Yosef's plan, as we've discussed numerous times. That was what Yosef wanted to see. He was trying to set it up. And that actually is what happens on a large scale, even though he doesn't get to the end like we discussed on Shabbat with the Joseph paradox. He doesn't get to the finish line. But at the end of the day, you have Yehuda, who's the same person that last time around suggests throwing him in the pit. Now, again, you have the favorite son of the father, Binyamin. You have Leah versus Ben Rachel. And the son of Leah says, take me instead. So the circle of Teshuvah potentially is completed, or almost completed. That's Yosef's decision. Sometimes Vayinahalem is not the parent trying to guide, to move the child, to make the child do what they want, because that's what they want, but because they know that that's what the child needs. And it is very difficult to be able to discern the difference between the two. It is very difficult for the parent. It's almost impossible for the child. And I want to explain why it's almost impossible for the child. The child, by and large, does not understand what a child is. You know, we call Chinese food Chinese food. If you go to China and they serve Chinese food, it doesn't say Chinese food on the restaurant. What does it say? Food. Correct? The child is completely not self-aware when it comes to the fact that he is a child or she is a child. They don't understand that. They don't get that. That's them. So even though for the parent it says child raising, for the kid, it's just food. This is just me. This is just my life. So whilst it is difficult for the parent to sometimes separate what they want for the kid and what they actually think is best for the kid, and by the way, actually is best for the kid, it's hard because your own nigiut, your own influences, your own desires, your own dreams play a part. It's hard. For a child, it's impossible. The kid cannot know. Because he doesn't know what it means to have a child. He doesn't know what it means to love a child. He doesn't know what it means to be up at night for a child. He thinks he knows. She thinks she knows. They have no clue. When do they figure this out? When they have a child. Exactly. At that point, suddenly you begin to realize, oh, this is what, I always thought to myself, says that a person is not omed al da'at rabo. He doesn't understand, the logic of his master until he turns 40. Until he turns 40. I said, you know what that means? That means because until he has a kid, but not just a kid, until his kid turns a teenager, he don't understand his rabbi. That's roughly when a guy's around 40 years old. Okay? Suddenly, there's a whole different thing. Yosef's Vayinahalem of the brothers, that was for them. It wasn't for him. And it's what Yosef was trying to say to them from the beginning. The brothers said, "Amaloch timloch alenu, mashol timshol manu." Is that what you're trying to do? Rule over us, get us in line. And Yosef, from the beginning, was only saying, "Et achai anochi mevakesh." I only want my brothers. I only want what's best for them. I'm willing to, like he said to his father, I'm going to go down to where they're shepherding the sheep by myself. I'm going to put myself in danger for them. What happens when Yosef reveals himself to his brothers? He puts himself in danger with them. Chachamim tell us that at that moment, when everyone left, he was alone with his brothers. They could have killed him and solved their problems. No one would have been able to stop them. Yosef was in tremendous danger. Yosef was only ever looking out for them. So therefore, whether there was a Vayinahalem, whether there was a Vayichalkel, the only aim of Yosef was only ever Vayichalkel. When it came to the Egyptians, it was different. Yosef, regard to these strangers, Yosef says to them, look, you want the food, this is the rules. Yosef's moving them around. Chachamim tell us, one of the reasons, why does Yosef move the Egyptians from place to place in the land? So the simple explanation is like the Gemara says about Sancherev. Bas Sancherev ubililan. And he moved them all around. Rambam says that the difference that during Bizman Hazeh, the mitzvah of Shiva Amamin, that the 7 nations that live in Eretz Israel that need to be taken out of the picture, those rules of Shiva Amamin don't apply today. Why? Once Sancherev came along, mixed everybody up, so nobody who lives on any land is the people that came there from before, because Sancherev mixed up the whole land. Rav Chaim has a whole piece on why Rambam doesn't say the same thing about Amalek, because once Sancherev came around, mixed everybody up the same way, there's no law about Shiva Amin. There should not be a law about Amalek. And on that, Rav Chaim explains that the idea of Amalek is like the song goes, it's a New York state of mind, right? There's an Amalek state of mind. A person who wants to kill a Jewish person, even if it costs them their life, like the Pasuk says, Ka'asher ta'asena devorim, like bees do, a bee stings, even though it knows that when it stings you, it's going to die. The terrorist suicide bomber mentality creates a name of Amalek. You have a terrorist who is willing to go into a room, into a bus, into a pizza shop, blow himself up. Guy's Amalek. Wow, how can it be Amalek if he's a descendant of Yishmael? The answer is, Amalek is not only a nation. Amalek is a state of mind, is a mentality. Okay? Now that we understand this, okay? I want to take back a look. Sancherev came, mixed everybody up. Why did he do that? Sancherev was ruling the world. You know, when people live in a certain place, they feel a very strong affinity to that place. If someone came tomorrow and took over America, okay? Imagine Canada invaded, they took over America, they made us fat with pancakes and maple syrup. I don't know what they would do. Can't imagine how Canada would do that. But let's just imagine, they're also way too nice. I kind of feel like if Canada took over America, they would say, listen, now that we've taken you over, why don't you take us over? That's not polite, you know? Guy's very nice. Either way, so imagine just for 1 second, right? In this scenario, Canada took over America. You might have Americans feeling, what's going on? This is our country. My parents grew up here. My grandparents. There's a nationalistic fervor that causes people to revolt. If you take this American guy and you put him in Guatemala, you take the Guatemalan, right? You put him in Iceland. He has no feeling or affinity. The place is not his, doesn't belong to him. So Sancherev understood that if you move someone, they won't revolt. The simple understanding of why Yosef is moving everybody everywhere is because, you know what, he just took the lands for Pharaoh. If he leaves the lands in the hands of Paro and no one is on their own land, no one's going to rebel. That's a simple understanding. The Chachamim tell us something remarkable. Yosef knew that the Bnei Israel, not only were they now in Goshen, but they were going to stay in Egypt for a very long time. And he said, why should my family feel like they're immigrants in the land, like they just came to this place, like they don't know where the local pizza shop is, or where the basketball court is, or where the school is? Let everybody feel the same. So he moves everybody around So when the guys come to Goshen, every Egyptian says, I'm new here, you're new here. There's no difference between them and anybody else. That means that Yosef's Vayinahalem, moving them from one place to the other. Where else do we find that word? Right before your favorite tefillah. Favorite tefillah is Az Yashir. Pasuk says, Vayinahalem b'chvedut. He moved the Egyptians in their chariots. They were bouncing around. The wheels came off. They were bouncing. Vayinahalem means, and he guided them. He escorted them. He moved them. He transported them. The transportation of the Egyptians by Joseph wasn't necessarily only for their benefit. It was whatever Joseph thought was the smartest thing. It wasn't about them. We're learning from here how a person needs to behave with members of their family. With your brother, with your father, with your mother, with your sister, with your brother-in-law, with your sister-in-law, with your son-in-law, with your daughter-in-law, all of this. Anashim achim anachnu. How do you behave with them? When you help them, you don't think, okay, what can I get from this help? You think, how can I best help this person? And if that's true for Yosef about his brothers, about his father, then I must share with you and end with a story about Rav Moshe Feinstein. One day, there's a knocker at Moshe Feinstein's door. A young woman is standing there. She says, Rav Moshe, please, I need to ask you a favor. Okay? She says, I'm getting married next week. I need a favor from you. She says, I'm a yetoma. I don't have my parents, my mother, father, whatever it was, passed away. I'm getting married this week to someone from Manhattan in the area. I have nobody here. I'm very poor. I could not afford to bring any family members. And I feel like I'm going to be at this wedding and no one's going to know who I am, and I don't have any family, and they might think that my family doesn't care about me. She says, please, could you come to my wedding and tell everyone that you're my karov, you're related to me. When Moshe Feinstein says, look, I feel terrible for you, I'd love to come, but I've never told a lie in my life. Moshe emet v'torato emet. Right? Why is Moshe's Torah emet? Because Moshe is emet. If Moshe is emet, then Torato is emet. Rav Moshe says, I can't lie. So she looks at him and she has tears in her eyes. And she says, aren't we all related? Don't we all come from Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov? It's a lie for you to say that you're related to me? Rav Moshe was crying with this young woman, feeling how alone she was, how sad she was. And that night Rav Moshe came around. He comes to the wedding. How you doing? Shalom, shalom. Wow, why's the rabbi? Oh, the Kala is related to me. Wow, Rabbi, if we would have known, we would have given you Sidur Kiddushin. I can't believe we only found out now. Rav Moshe is thinking, I also only found out now. Every single Jew is your family. Every single Jew is your brother, is your sister. Vayichalkel Yosef et aviv ve'et echav. So my friends, I just want to say one more thing. In the aftermath of the war, you had everybody, their brother, their sister, and their cousin, realizing that they needed to help tremendously in Eretz Israel. The war, the soldiers, the vests, the helmets. Our brothers and sisters are sitting there now, and the problems that they're facing financially, they didn't get better. They got worse. The people that are displaced didn't suddenly magically get jobs. They don't suddenly magically have their house back. So even though the war, and people are still dying, and we're saying and praying every day, but kind of people are calmer about the war. It's kind of like a little bit more in hand than it was right back in the beginning. We've kind of a little bit forgotten. Yeah, okay, there's 140 hostages. Yeah, let's pray for them. Not like the way we were. This is your family. You know what's happening every night in Eretz Yisrael? The family members of these hostages, are screaming, crying, political pressure, financial pressure, doing everything that they can. Aren't they also a karov of ours? Isn't it also our brother and our sister? You know, you see the name of a soldier. You want to know if you know them. You want to know if they come from an area in Israel that you know. Oh, are they a soldier from New York? Oh my gosh. Did you hear this kid? Why? Bas Sancherev u'Bilelan. You know, sometimes it's called Sancherev. Sometimes it's called Hitler. Sometimes it's called Stalin. But enemies of the Jews have come and moved us all around. But if we still lived in the same city, that kid would be, his last name would be the same as yours. Farhi, Shama, Towel, same on top. It would be the same. You'd feel that this is a kid from the kibbutz. You hear the way people of these towns are talking about their kid. The kid always came to the shul. He was the first one to help out all the old people climb up the stairs. This was the light of our community. But because Sancherev came in Bilelan means that now it's not my brother? That, my friends, is a avodah, is a part of the work I feel that we are supposed to feel. We are supposed to feel in these days. Yosef lives apart from his brothers for a long time, and they hurt him. They hurt him terribly. But when they came back in the picture and they needed him, Vayichakel Yosef, he saw them as his brothers. He saw his brothers the same as he saw his father. The pasuk calls them the same. Et aviv ve'et echav. Can we do that? Can we try? Even for the brother that maybe did not behave towards us, or the family member that was not so nice. Can we give unconditionally? Can we say to ourselves that they treated me not nice? But if I'm upset at him, that means that I believe that one should treat the person nice. So can I be that? Oh, they only call me now that they need me. I'll end with that phrase. I saw a phrase that made such an impact on me. The line goes, don't be upset that they reached out to you in the dark. Be thankful that they saw you as a source of light. May Hashem bless us, Be'ezrat Hashem, always to have that heart. Live enam, like the pasuk, like it says, Matamar ze en lo ela lev echad, af Yisrael en lahem ela lev echad le'avinu shem hashabayim. Baruch Adonai le'olam.